Hey everybody, I just went to see this movie and it moved me. And before I start this review, there's just one thing I have to do. The deity who I worship now, I can only ask of you one thing. Please. I'm just messing with you. So today I went and seen God's Not Dead 2, which the first problem I have with this movie is the title. It's not really a sequel. I mean, it takes place a couple months after the original movie, but calling it God's Not Dead 2, I mean, why not God's Not Dead, The Straw Man Rises, or God's Not Dead, The Evolution of the Shitty Argument. The next thing I'd like to say about this is just the terrible quality of the previews leading up to the movie. These previews are just specifically crafted and engineered to just do nothing but offer lip service to a very specific demographic. Who's ready for that Rachel Scott Columbine movie? Or that Dinesh D'Souza, The Secret History of the Democratic Party? And speaking of a very specific demographic, while in the theater, I was easily the youngest person by a factor of 15 to 20 years. Just saying. So for the first part of this, I'm going to be talking about the technical aspects of the movie itself. And, you know, there are a few praises that I would give this movie. Cinematography was actually pretty good. I enjoyed the camera work. You know, it worked out very well. The art direction was also pretty good. They had very good placing of the art. They had decent settings. They did a decent job when it came to what shots they picked and where they picked to do them. You know, the score was decent. I mean, I don't enjoy the music personally, but when it came to how the music fit the movie and the pacing of the movie itself, they did a pretty good job with that. You know, I'm proud of that. Just in terms of acting, Jesse Metcalfe, who plays the defense lawyer in the movie, wonderful job. I mean, the last movie you probably saw this guy in was John Tucker Must Die. And he wasn't terrible in that movie, but I mean, really in this movie, he did an absolutely outstanding job. I don't care if you're opposed to the ideas in the movie, he did a wonderful, wonderful job. And I am totally just sucking his dick right now. I don't care, I enjoyed his acting. Also, Ray Wise, the guy who played the prosecutor, you know, he wasn't as good as Jesse, but he was very convincing. You know, he really got into his character. And, you know, that's something I'm really happy about, is, you know, those two actors really helped carry the movie. However, although this movie had its virtues, the list of critiques is far, far longer. As you would probably expect, this movie suffers from a severe case of Christian persecution syndrome. I'll get into that a little bit further when I start discussing the plot, but gosh, I mean, they create scenarios and events and things that just really don't happen in real life. And they create this narrative that is just absolutely bonkers. Like, it is just way out in left field. And the movie also seems to really suffer from an identity crisis. Is it a drama? Is it a crime film? Is it a family movie? To me, all it really seemed like was A Few Good Men, but without Tom Cruise and Jack Nicholson. Another few flaws in the movie is it has almost no character development. A lot of the characters' personalities remain stagnant, and they don't seem to advance in any way as people, as characters, anything like that. And there's really almost no emotional payoff at the end of the movie because it just ineffectively builds a believable conflict. When it comes to flow and pacing of the movie, it seems like the movie itself was tripping over rocks constantly. You have all these unnecessary cameos from the first film, like the Asian kid, and the two pastors, and the lady that had cancer. And they just create all these really unnecessary subplots that completely subtract from the film. I mean, it'll be going good, and you'll be in the courtroom, and you'll have interactions between Jesse Metcalfe's and Melissa Joan Hart's characters, and you'll be starting to build that steam, and then boom, subplot, and it'll stay on there for far too long. You know, I'm a fan of subplots in movies, but when you focus far too long on them, it destroys the pace, and it kills its own flow. And I know just a few moments ago I lauded Jesse Metcalfe's and Ray Wise's acting, but throughout the rest of the movie, It was absolutely atrocious. It's like something you would see in a high school play or something at your local drama theater. I mean, it just all seemed forced. It just seemed disingenuous. And that's what made the movie difficult to watch. You know, had it not been for, you know, Jesse Metcalf's and Ray Wise's performance, and even Pat Boone as the crazy old guy, you know, it just wouldn't have carried the movie at all. Also, every attempt at comic relief just seemed to really fall flat on its face. I mean, in the last movie, you had those two pastors, and their interactions, they did create some genuine comedy, like when the car constantly broke down, and oh god, just the frustration. But there in this movie, they had hardly any interactions, and there's really not any unintentional comedy either. So here's the part where I analyze the actual plot of the film. Spoiler alert, I'm going to be talking about some major plot points, so if you actually feel like going to see the movie, you might want to go watch it now and watch the rest of the review later. I'm going to be giving a sort of brief synopsis and an analysis thereof. So as I stated earlier, the main flaw in this movie is that it creates situations and scenarios that just don't exist in real life. So to start the movie, we're introduced to this kid, and she's lost her brother, and she's all sad about it, and you see her parents, and they just seem to be distant and not caring, and oh, you know, you better suck it up or you won't get into college, and you better do better because it's junior year and it's the all or nothing year. So then you see her meet up with her friend, and she's just complaining about her parents. And then they go to class, and you see that Melissa Joan Hart's character is her teacher, it's an AP World History teacher. And, you know, she finishes her lesson, and she noticed that, you know, the girl just seemed really upset, so she's like, hey, are you okay? And then in all of the teenage angst she can muster, yeah, I'm fine, you know, and walks out. So then what we have is there's this coffee shop that seems kind of like a central nexus for where all the characters, I guess, start to create interactions, and Melissa Joan Hart's character is sitting, you know, having some coffee, and the kid comes up and she's all like, I lied earlier, I'm not okay. They sort of have this conversation about, you know, her brother and then her parents not seeming to care, and the kid's like, well, you just never seem to feel bad, you know, how do you keep it up? And Melissa Joan Hart's character's like, Jesus, I love Jesus. So furthering the plot, we're back in the classroom, and the teacher is having this lesson about nonviolent protest. And she's got pictures of Martin Luther King Jr. and Gandhi up there, and she's talking about, you know, just how this nonviolent protest was this revolution. And the kid raises her hand and says something like, oh, well, would that be, I guess, parallel to Jesus? And the teacher's like, well, yeah, and she starts quoting some scripture and talking about what the things that Jesus said align up with what Martin Luther King said. You know, and it's obvious watching this, even from my perspective, she was in no way proselytizing. She wasn't advocating any theology. She wasn't trying to push forth any dogma. And the only reason she quoted the scripture was to have a source material from which to give citation reference to her words. The same thing that she would do for a letter that Martin Luther King wrote, or for anything that Gandhi has said on public record. She was in no way evangelizing these kids. So during this exchange, you see this kid take his phone out, and he's just like, I'm gonna fuck up this teacher's day for talking about Jesus. I'm probably an atheist. You know, and ooh, the plot thickens. So the next thing we see, she's getting called into this disciplinary hearing, and the principal's escorting her, and she steps into the room, and she has her union rep, and you have the school's attorney and this, you know, really sleazy, shady guy. And this is the point where the movie removes its own credibility, because you can have multiple testimonies that show that she was, in fact, not proselytizing. She was giving a reference based on a supposed historical figure. Right there. That's where the movie should have ended. But they're going to make an example of her, and they're going to set a precedent where we can't have Christianity in school anymore because we're atheists and we're secular and fuck your rights. So, next, we're back at the coffee shop, and we see her attorney, who is bearded John Tucker. I guess he graduated high school and decided not to play basketball anymore. Anyway, so they start introducing, his character, and he's the lawyer, he's a low man on the totem pole, and nobody wanted her case, so he had to take it. And, she's like, oh, well, are you a believer? And he's like, a Christian? Nah. And he's an atheist, but he's an ally to the Christians, so he's an okay atheist, because he's not a tool of the devil, because he will be converted later. You know, it's funny the way they present him, because when she first meets him, she's like, well, you don't look like a lawyer. And he's like, oh, I'll take that as a compliment. Because he's like, oh, got this, you know, scruffy beard, and he's got the tweed jacket and the jeans and, like, the brown loafers. And he's just like the hipster lawyer, you know. Now they're back at this disciplinary hearing, again, with the same people, except now he's here to represent her instead of her union rep. And they offer this plea. It's like, oh, well, if you just renege on your statement and say you made a mistake, then we'll just drop everything. And she's like, no, I can't do that because I didn't do anything wrong. And you know what? She didn't do anything wrong. She is absolutely correct. She did nothing wrong, which once again, this is where the movie should have ended. Because any attempt at a plot past this point is laughable at best and takes place in some kind of parallel universe where Christians are actually really persecuted in America. You know, because Christians are persecuted. Because they are. Totally. Don't deny that. Now we kind of get to the part where it's finishing setting up the movie, and you have Ray Wise's character who's the atheist, and he's the prosecutor, and just, you know, the way he pulls up, it introduces him in such a malicious manner. It's in the dark, and he's got all these dark clothes, and he kind of has this slinky walk, and his purpose here is he's trying to manipulate the parents into not letting the girl, I think her name's Brooke, not letting Brooke be at these hearings, proceedings, or even talk to Melissa Joan Hart. And, you know, just saying, we'll get her into this Ivy League college and the money. And it's just being the sleaziest shitbag you can imagine. Because he's an atheist. So then we see them in this courtroom. And technically this is supposed to be a civil case. But they are treating this shit like a full-on criminal case. I mean, it is just ridiculous to the manner in which they blow this out of proportion. Once again, Christian persecution complex, just because, I guess. But I mean, the defense starts out really well. You know, he gives some good arguments, he really stands up for his client. Now furthering this narrative of Christian persecution, completely unrelated to this case itself, these pastors are at this breakfast. You know, one of the pastors from the first movie is sitting here just munching down and having a good godly breakfast. And this other guy's like, big old white crusty guy sits down and he's like, well, they finally done it. They're asking they filed this subpoena so they can have all of our transcripts of our sermons for the last 3 or 6 months. Oh, I don't know what we're going to do because the government's stepping in. And keep in mind, this has nothing to do with the case. This is just some completely unrelated government bullshit because Christians really, truly are persecuted in this country. So much that we are now going to start telling them what they can start teaching in church. Right. Tell that to Mississippi, honestly. So at this point, the prosecution uses its sleazy atheism to remove a lot of the credibility of Sabrina the Teenage Witch plus 50 pounds. And then the plot thickens some more because there's tension and there's division, derision. So juxtaposed with what's going on inside the courtroom, now we see outside there's these non-violent Christian protesters that are sitting there like locking hands and having all these signs, and they have these atheists that are on the other side, and they really portray them like rabid beasts, just, you know, just shouting and doing this shit and, you know, doing extra. Make it look like you're having conversations. Make it look really angry. You know, think about somebody didn't put $10 in the collection plate. Oh, fuck, no. You know, and they just really portray anybody that's not a Christian as just such a shithead in this movie. So now the defense, trying to overcome this loss of credibility, starts to say, well, hey, you know what? If Jesus really existed, then you are quoting the historical figure that really existed. So now they set off and try and prove that Jesus actually existed historically. You know, when the defense starts going really well for them, they call in these forensic analysts and this cold case homicide detective, and they start trying to prove the historicity of Jesus. And it starts to go pretty well. Then they run out of witnesses, and then, who comes to the stand but Brooke? And then they destroy her. And they seem like they just lost this case. It just seems over. And following this is actually one of my favorite parts of the movie. It's really genuinely touching. Like, so Melissa Joan Hart's character is so upset, and she knows she's gonna lose, and she hears this, you know, knock on the door. She goes outside, and there's all these kids from her class, and they have these candles, and they start singing, you know, how great thou art. And you know what? I don't care if you're a Christian or not, or if you're an atheist, or if you're a Muslim, whatever. It's such a beautiful scene because it really shows cohesiveness and it shows community and support. Not to mention, it's the only scene in the movie where Melissa Joan Hart's character shows real, genuine emotion. It seems like it's not forced. It's really good acting. It's the only part where her character seems genuine. So after this, we see them once again in the final courtroom scene, and Melissa Joan Hart's character sitting there, but her lawyer is absent, and everybody else is there. And the judge is like, is somebody missing? Ha ha, passive aggressiveness. And then we see, Jesse Metcalf's character walking with a sense of purpose down the hall, and he's like, oh my god, he's got regular shoes on, and it seems like he has a business suit, and he just, boom! Busts in that fucking courtroom, he's got a clean shave, matching suit, nice haircut, fucking matching shoes. That's a joke in the movie also. And he sits down, and he's ready to fucking go. You can tell that now he means business. And in terms of storytelling, I actually do kind of enjoy this next part because the rest of the movie is really predictable. I'm not gonna lie. And this actually caught me off guard because he's like, my next witness is my client. And everybody's just like, what? Okay, cool. And he gets up there and starts tearing into her ass. I mean, he's just like, what did you say to me off record that was actually private that I'm going to try and use to sway the jury against everybody else but you by showing genuine reaction that you had no idea was going to happen? She's like, I don't fucking know, why are you doing this? But at this point, he creates one of the biggest straw man arguments I believe that I've ever heard. And he just turns to the jury and he's all like, now I'm really pissed. And you know what? You're being discriminatory because she's a Christian. And the right to believe is being infringed upon. Because everybody has the right to believe. So if we're going to discriminate on the right to believe, why don't we just go the full way? Why don't you go ahead and convict her and just rule in favor of the other guys? And you know what? Why don't you just go ahead and fucking shoot her? Nobody cares about religious liberty. Why should you? That's what we always seem to do in America. Because justice comes from the end of a gun. And you know what? It's because she's a Christian that you're discriminating against like all the other Christians, and everything she says is okay because Jesus. And because of that bullshit straw man argument, she actually wins. And then they go outside and everybody's like, God's not dead! Oh yeah, rejoice! Oh! And everybody's so fucking happy. And then the whole movie, there's been this ridiculous sexual tension between these two characters, and you're like, is he gonna kiss her? Come on, he's way too attractive for her, but that fucking matters not, because I've been waiting for this. You want this emotional payoff. Is he gonna kiss her? And then they're all standing there, and you're like, no? Okay, they start to drift apart, and then he like puts his arm around her, and you're like, ah! And it cuts off, and it's like, what the fuck? You killed it with that argument. You killed it with the predictability of the movie. You almost saved it with that crazy ass scene where you busted in there looking like fucking awesome dude number 6. And then you let me down? I have not been emotionally fulfilled. I'm so disappointed. And just like the end of the first movie, they go to a Newsboys concert and they have this awesome song, God's not dead, he's surely alive. And, they have this, at the end of the movie, share the fact that God's not dead, text everybody you know. So, I would give this movie 2 out of 5. It's not the worst movie I've ever seen, but good God, it was not great. When it comes to Christian movies, it's up here, but when it comes to regular movies, it's like, is that a B film? No, that's not even a B film. So, I wouldn't suggest watching it unless you want a good laugh, or if you just really want to be annoyed by stupid-ass arguments. Anyways, everybody, if you enjoyed this video, please check out my other ones. Like, comment, and subscribe. Check me out on Twitter. I'm the Opinion Atheist. Reason beats bullshit every time.